Hi and welcome to Straight Out of Camera, proudly sponsored by Fujifilm South Africa. It's episode 7 and the genre we will be discussing today is commercial photography. And joining me in studio is Managing Director of techsmart.co.za, Mike Kubert, and from Cape Town, photographer Leon Oosthuizen. Good morning, gentlemen.
Hi, Ashley. All well. How are you?
I'm very well, and you? How's
Hi,
it,
Leon.
Leon?
Hi. Good morning, guys.
Mike, commercial photography is a very broad genre, but typically means a photograph that's being used to help sell, advertise, or market a product, service, or person. All these photographs you see in magazines, online publications, billboards, and CD covers, they all fall under commercial photography.
Yeah, definitely. I think, think about fashion photography, commercial shoots, commercial portraiture where they go and take photos of people and companies. It's very, very wide. I think now with digital, it's certainly picked up quite a bit. But one of the most interesting parts of commercial photography I've come across is what they call death portraits, family posing for photos with loved ones that have actually died. This became very popular in Victorian England. Of course, during that period of time, there were a lot of bad diseases around with the infant mortality rate sky high. Having the family pose with the deceased was a way to commemorate the dead, and although it was expensive to have these types of portraits taken, you must remember it was often the only time that families would consider doing so once a child or a loved one has died. Most of the time, it would be the only photo they had at all, not only of the deceased, but the family in general. Long exposures of these family portraits made the dead often appear sharper than their living counterparts because they were, of course, not moving while the living were. This adds yet another layer of creepiness to what is already a very strange type of commercial photography. The Kodak Brownie's introduction in 1900 and also a drop in the infant mortality rate caused the death photography market to disappear completely.
Crazy. Social media, that's obviously had a massive impact on commercial photography. I just think of especially brands viewing Instagram. There's a whole lot of images of certain photographers that these brands love, and when they need to shoot their next product, I think that has an impact on who they choose as their commercial photographer.
Yes, definitely. I think just having a look at Instagram and, of course, the amount of followers that certain photographers have, that always plays a role. Two things I think kind of led to this. Definitely the advent of digital photography increased the amount of photos taken just considerably. And then with social media, the ability for people to promote themselves through there, to have their photos showcased to the public, yet another way of just getting your name out there, building a brand for yourself, and allowing people to see what you are capable of. You always kind of wonder how much is too much self-promotion, but at the same time, before it was really difficult to showcase what you can do. Now it's extremely easy.
It's quite funny because this is the same sort of argument we had when digital and film was debating who's going to win that war. I think that digital has obviously created more photographers, and it's obviously killed some of the normal commercial photographers out there's work to a degree, because now you've got 600 people shooting instead of maybe 5 specialists. And I feel that this could be the same situation for commercial photographers, because you would have maybe 30 or 40 photographers that only specialize in that sort of product photography field, and now you've got 800,000 photographers outside there, and it's dependent on what the brand feels that they would want to associate that image to be, who they're going to choose inevitably.
Well, you just have to look at the photography market. What happened there? It was this quiet, cozy place, and then all of a sudden, everyone with a camera decided to become a wedding photographer. I think it might be the case in certain aspects for commercial photography, if you look at product shoots or at least fashion. But there is a sense that for certain stuff, you still need the studio. You need the really strong studio background to kind of make it work. So yeah, I think we'll learn a lot more from Leon, which we're going to talk to.
Have you ever thought about the power of social media? Social media has the power to make your business grow. Yeah. Why don't you let us manage your social media? Because our business is to see your business grow. Visit us at www.bstownmedia.co.za.
You're listening to brandlive.co.za.
So our guest today is Leon Oosthuizen. He's a Cape Town-based commercial photographer, and he got interested in photography at the ripe old age of just 3. And later, between choosing to study engineering and photography, he chose the latter, ending up with a fine art degree from what is now the Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University. Leon shoots just about anything, from products, corporate portraiture, weddings and architecture to conceptual and abstract images. With many local and international clients, Leon has been featured on Pasela, the Street Focus podcast, #Radio, ORMS TV, and of course now, the Straight Out of Camera podcast. He says, I've always had this urge to know and explore technically as well as creatively. I'd say I'm a good mix of the two aspects, which allows me to not only have a big picture view, but to also get into the details to solve problems. My goal is to make eye poetry with every shot. Leon, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you.
Let's be honest, at the age of 3, some of us were barely potty trained, but you were already picking up a camera.
I wasn't picking it up. I was fiddling with it because it had knobs and numbers and things on it, and it looked all interesting and technical. And I think, I don't know. That's just maybe a stereotype, but it's a very boy thing to do. But my dad had a Minolta SRT Super, which I still have and still shoot with from time to time. And what I was told to do is just hold it still and twist the thing on the front, which is the focus ring on the lens. And I could, in the viewfinder, see that a fuzzy rendition of an image came into sharp focus. And I had the ability to choose when to make a picture. And then obviously you wait months and then you get it back magically. And that moment was cemented in my understanding of image making and the way that I am able to see the world and decide what gets recorded and how it's going to look. It wasn't actually like a miraculous moment in itself. It was just the start of an exploration, and I think it was a great introduction into assimilating the world around me in a visual language rather than just spoken one.
Leon, how did you decide that obviously fine art photography would be the one to choose, and why NMMU at that stage?
Well, the NMMU at that stage was still called the Port Elizabeth Technikon, and they've now fused to be the Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University. But the thing is, I tried my hand at engineering. I thought that was going to be my route. I love inventing things. I love technology. There was a show called Beyond 2000, and I thought, I'm going to change the world because there's all sorts of cool things that like people are inventing and they don't know how to apply it. And I have an inventive mind. I like solving problems that way. So I tried my hand at chemical engineering, and in that time I realized there's this thing called dyslexia, and that made that I couldn't prove to my professors that I understood the math within the given time. So I tried moving over, trying a different language instead of the language of numbers, the language of pictures, the one that I already knew quite well. So I went back to Port Elizabeth to study that from a fine arts side. Thinking that after the broad base, I'll probably go into design. And I fell in love with two art mediums, specifically because it was offered at that stage, fine art photography and stained glass. So those are two rather technical art mediums, but they were significantly positioned between technical and creative aspects. They had enough technical stuff to keep me interested in that way. It's not just arty-farty kind of stuff. So that was my intro into it, and the reason for it is it's the oldest art school, and there seems to have been a lot of interest in the school, a lot of diversity, and they had all the disciplines under one roof. And obviously, it's close to home. I'm from PE. It's a cool place, and there are no amazing mountains like in Table Bay. No vineyards and anything. It's a lot of wind and it's kind of flat.
But I hear the best people come from Port Elizabeth.
The very best. And many of them leave Port Elizabeth to go and explore, but your creativity is forged there because you have to go and find stuff. You need to figure out what it is that makes you tick there. Cool things don't necessarily present themselves; they're not as obvious. So it's a good place to go and kickstart your creative career.
Leon, we're here today to talk about commercial photography. What do you think separates a good commercial photographer from an average one?
I think the answer rings true for basically any kind of photographer at the moment. You mentioned earlier that, Isley, there are more photographers around. So what would have been 5 specialists are now 600 people who do a fairly good job technically. Cameras are now more capable. I mean, back in the day when there were only 5 photographers in a city, those guys manually focused bellows kind of cameras, and anything smaller than 4x5 was considered sort of portable and not really great quality, because, I mean, what we consider full frame now was small and laughable at some point. Yeah. Those guys were technical extremists, and now cameras and computers and things take care of a lot of what would otherwise have to be faffed over in the darkroom. So that entry into it changes the entire thing of how we approach commercial photography now, the way that people assimilate images, and where they get applied. The majority of the images are actually made now for digital purposes, not print and billboard anymore. It's a very small percentage of those that get printed. I think digital is where the majority of the world sees images. And with that in mind, cell phones and all those create images. So for a commercial photographer to be able to make that shift from a very studio mindset where 5 final photographs at the end of the day means you've had a productive one, now the pace is much higher, the turnaround time is faster, and people, the demand obviously for image making is far more escalated. People want that, and for a commercial photographer, like I said, you need to define what it is that separates you from the rest of those 600 or 6 million other people who are also able to make images with a great amount of ease. The barrier to entry is quite low now. I think that's the biggest point I want to make, and you've got to delve into who you are and what it is that you enjoy making, and that's the thing that you go for.
For listeners out there thinking of going pro, what are the skills you need before you make the jump?
Mike, I think the most important skill is one that's sorely lacking at the moment. It stems from actually a biblical reference. It's the whole idea of speaking the truth in love. That means that you need to be able to take on criticism and critiques, that feedback. That's the breakfast of champions. And you need to be able to do that with your own work as well. You need to be critical enough and honest enough without gunning yourself all the time. You don't need to sit at the end of the day and feel like a failure. You need to be able to assess. If you're not able to do that, any other skill would actually not matter at all, because otherwise it's that the same as gear acquisition syndrome. You buy a lot of external things without actually solving the root cause. Another skill, I think, what I would say more technical kind of a skill is that you need to obviously know lighting, and the kind of work that you do requires different types of lighting. So you need to understand the physics of light. You need to understand how that applies to the particular genre that you're photographing. Some people specialize very specifically in architecture or in wine bottle photography. I mean, those are very niche market things. But the broader spectrum, you need to understand lighting, number one. And number two, you really need to know your camera back to front in the dark, and you need to know what the different things are that requires, or that the camera is made to do, that the job requires. If you miss out on those things, then commercial photography can become tricky and cumbersome, and then there's a lot of do-overs, and then people wait.
You know, one of the things is you have to have an eye for detail too. And let's be honest, for good photography, you have to certainly be able to see the image kind of in your head before taking it. Is it possible to train the eye to become skilled with what it sees and how to compose? Or is there an inherent understanding that all photographers possess?
I think it's down to a personality thing in a way. It is true, you have to see it in your head before you go, but you can present 1,000 different photographers who are all commercial and professional with the same problem, and they'll come up with 1,000 different solutions. Some will be very similar and others will be off the charts different, depending on what kind of personality that they have, and also what the job description is. So imagining, it's an exercise we had at Tech, is to imagine a particular scenario where there's a man and a woman, and the the woman is standing on the sidewalk, the man is in a car, and you need to imagine who the man is and who the woman is and what it is that they're talking about, where they are, what time of the day it is. And just based on that, our listeners even can now understand that if you had to present different details, it could be a middle-aged man in an old Volvo speaking to his mom because she's lost again and she couldn't find her way home. It could be his daughter because he just dropped off at the movies, but everybody somehow defaults to a pretty woman scene at some point in their thought process because it's something that we've already been primed with. So that's a long way of answering your question, but yes, you need to make that image in your mind and figure out what that visual communication is going to be. Because if it's commercial photography, it's not just your own stuff that you're putting forward. You need to be able to solve problems, visual problems that live in an abstract space. And you need to make them tangible for your client and make it commercially viable for them.
I know that you have just shot at the Boca Film Festival and you did some images of a Mercedes car and a model. Now, if they were your clients and you needed to pitch for an ad campaign for them especially, what is the process? Do they phone you and say, Leon, please come in, we would like to chat to you about doing the next ad? Do you have to prepare almost like a storyboard? How do you approach a client?
It depends on the way that that conversation starts. If it's an introduction, then sometimes there's already a need from the client to have a particular campaign or a particular set of images done. That might be corporate portraits, and then that evolves into like, oh, they see your portfolio, and you're also able to shoot X, Y, Z. So having your portfolio ready in any conversation is pretty important already, and just having it on your phone so that people can see what it is that you have. So that's typically how I go about making friends, really, and gaining clients. Is that you start conversations, you show people your work, and sometimes the client itself, they're not interested. So you need to speak to advertising agencies and the people who often end up being the middleman for their commercial work. The stuff that we did for the Boca Film Festival, that was in line with the film festival activities itself, and Mercedes were kind enough to make that entire space available and move cars around for the kind of shots that we needed. And from that, there seems to be a lot more interest just purely because they could see the way that I work, the kind of images that come straight from the camera. I'm using, for those shots, I use the new Fujifilm GFX. So the guys were able to see what kind of quality I'm able to extract even before I started editing. It's just straight out of camera. It's really cool. So the confidence that client has in, number one, seeing me work, and number two, seeing the results coming straight from the camera before everything is photoshopped. I think that breeds a lot more confidence in people so that they can see what your abilities really are. That's a good way to start. Cold calling, I think, for me, that's a really scary thing. I don't like just picking up the phone and asking people if they need photographs. It feels like a door-to-door salesman. It's far nicer having a real conversation with a real person and finding out if they need something. And those happen more casually. And there are ways that you have to maybe get a little bit out of your comfort zone to figure out which ways might work. Because if you just put your work out there and hopefully somebody will like a photograph on Instagram and then book you, that's the things of fairy tales. That happens far fewer times than most people would like to believe. It's actually hard work to go and find your clients.
Do you find that your clients are mostly knowledgeable about what makes a good photo, or is there a certain amount of education involved trying to make them come around to what you are presenting to them?
If it's somebody like Mercedes, of course they have a legacy of amazing images that have been made for them over the years. So visually they're more in tune with what a good photograph looks like. But I often get asked by smaller companies who don't have a clear idea of their brand or their brand identity. They're not knowledgeable in the kind of technical aspects of how a photo shoot on a commercial level functions, how it works, and how to communicate their expectations and even the application of the images. So there's a lot of client education that happens in a consultation meeting that I need to have beforehand, because that settles expectations on both sides. because you can be shooting all day long and not make an entire like a single image that they want to use because they weren't able to describe the mood of the light that they want, or the particular target audience that they're trying to reach.
At the start, we talked about Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, the social media aspect of things. Do you find that there's a lot of self-promotion that's needed? And then also, where's the line where self-promotion becomes just too much?
That's a good question, Mike. I often wonder about this kind of a thing because there are recipes that people promote now. And I mean, these are kids in high school that say, like, hey, I've got so many million followers because of X, Y, Z. You need to do this, that, and the other to have a lot of followers. But the point is not to have followers for me. I'd rather put out 20 good shots than have a major following and not a lot of experience to back up should a big client approach me for something. So I try to rather be conservative in the way that I approach stuff. I don't have a massive Instagram following. I think I've just clipped 1,000, which is actually, in terms of big accounts, that's not so much. But the people that I do have conversations with, the people I do interact with, those are solid conversations. Those are people who are genuinely interested and enjoy the stuff that I do. And from that, the conversations start. So it's more of an online portfolio for me than it is interactive platform. And it's a nice thing for somebody else to have in their hand and point fingers at and say, is this the guy that they want to do the work? So that's how I approach my social media. Instagram that way is at least a showing of images. Facebook is more where there's interaction. People can ask questions and interact, and so those are the two main platforms where I'm active. And I try not to be too active on too many things either. Otherwise, it gets too busy, and you need to manage all of those accounts. So find out where your target market spends most of their time and how they choose to interact and how they might find you, and that's where you do the whole social media thing.
I totally agree with that. I think sometimes we spend too much time on social media and not enough time working. If you take a reference, Michael John Lewis, one of South Africa's top 3 commercial photographers, he shoots globally, but his Instagram and Facebook page does not show that. He only posts, when he feels it's relevant, and I think that's the most important part. Sometimes we try and make ourselves look busy rather than actually be busy.
No, I totally agree with that, Isley. The other thing is, I try and think of myself as the person receiving this constant stream of images. So if there's this drive in a photographer to constantly post things online to look busy and look successful, without actually referencing how long this activity has been going on, or there's just multiple shots from the same thing, and things start to look very, very similar, and it actually it waters it down. It makes it a little bit less punchy for me. I'd rather post few things and make them interesting, make them cool, and tag well. A lot of guys post images to show, hey, I'm very quick to post things, but then there's no reference to how it's done or who it's for. The whole tagging thing for me is quite interesting. That's far more important to do that correctly once a week than post a whole bunch of stuff just to show what you've done, to look busy even though you're not.
Yeah, I've also seen photographers picking up campaigns because they do have a large social media following. They might not be technically the best, but there is a sense that they are taking care of the campaign because there's also a certain amount of promotion of the brand happening afterwards to their followers when they said they shot for this and this company and here's the photos.
Yeah, that's true. When you take a look at what kind of a client that is, different types of clients obviously have different requirements and pitch at different groups of people in our society. So the LSM is a big determining factor, or maybe the age group, cultural groups and all that, and where those people interact. So if a person with a 16 million strong followership that posts landscapes quite often, he's not gonna be asked by Aston Martin to park a car in a landscape and then do that. Not necessarily, because Aston has a different clientele. They've got a different kind of following, different types of people that look at their stuff. So you need to understand the target market as much as the type of photography that you're doing. A big following will land you certain clients, but it will only land you a particular type of client or a particular type of campaign, which is fine, because that means that you're generating money out of the thing that you enjoy photographing in any case. But you've got to go and find that. That's why I said at the beginning, if you are honest enough with yourself, you are able to know what it is that you say yes and no to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, social media has really sort of enriched us with this, but my concern's always been that you might have your 180,000 followers, and in the beginning of like Instagram, you couldn't see where they were. The people that are following you might be anywhere in the world. So what I normally ask is, I want the analytics. I want to know regionally, where are they? Is it going to make sense for South Africa? Because that's ultimately where I'm looking at
Are you
growing.
talking about a brand perspective?
Yeah. So I want to grow in South Africa. I don't want to necessarily grow in America. That doesn't help me for my sales. So that's sort of a thing that I look for. So I don't know if it's necessarily for me as a brand important about the reach. It's more about who you're reaching.
Yeah, it's the honesty in the process, rather than presenting a number of followers as the only leverage to convince your prospective client that you are the worthy photographer.
Leon, I think from what I could gather from your portfolio on the social media aspects as well as your website, you are very keen to photograph a number of things. There's not one speciality that you aim towards. Do you find that kind of enriches things, or how do you feel about being able to capture so many things?
I think it goes back to that 3-year-old that's really inquisitive about many different things. I want to know about stuff. I want to know how they work and why they work the way they do. And it's not just the mechanics and the technical makeup of stuff, but it's also the creative intent. Why is it that it's interesting in the first place? Why am I drawn to it? What kind of conversation do I have in my mind about that thing? So another photographer that I'm referencing often about this is Irving Penn, who is able to pick up a camera and make amazing images. Doesn't matter what it is that he was photographing, from a technical and a creative perspective. For me, that motivates me. So I think with the diversity of images, genres, people want me to be pigeonholed as a particular genre. It's one of the checkboxes that people often say, "Oh, no, your Instagram account must be like one particular thing," or you've got to present one thing, because people want to have that simplicity. But more and more, I've had conversations with clients because I asked them why it is that they chose me over other prospective photographers. And they said to me, it's because I have a broader base. I have references outside of a particular genre, so it's something that will help me tell their story more accurately. It comes down to a broader base of experience. So it obviously takes longer to establish your momentum in the way that you do your business and the way that people perceive it. But if that's a consistent thing where whatever you post has a particular flavor, and for me that has a mix of something that's there's a sense of wonder and beauty in the thing. I always want to promote something that's positive. I'm not the guy that goes out and photographs sad things, and even when things are falling apart, I still see the beauty in it. If there's line, texture, form, all that kind of formal elements, and combining how it works. And this is just distilled down into a business version of storytelling. In a way, it's window dressed information, so it's compelling for whoever else looks at it.
Being able to shoot in studio is often something that separates the pros from perhaps those that just want to shoot regular photos. How easy is it to get into studio photography, to master the studio, so to say?
It's very easy to get in. It's very hard to master. I've learned from a couple of well-respected photographers in Cape Town that the more complex you make things, the harder it becomes, and it doesn't have to be complicated to be good. you always see these promotional things of behind the scenes where there's so much activity going on and there's 20 different lights and everybody is it's extremely busy thing. It almost looks like a Hollywood set of activity, except it's to photograph one particular small little item or just a portrait and all that. So the simplicity of it actually is very hard to achieve, but you've got to go through figuring out which lenses you need, what kind of lighting do you want, what modifiers do what kind of things. So in studio, that's probably the hardest thing, is to be able to take a blank canvas, literally a white infinity curve, and create in front of that. That's your space onto which you create. Comes back to that point you made earlier, that you need to have a vision of what kind of image you're creating, and then you build it from scratch, where the majority of photographers that pick up a cell phone or a compact camera, they go out and find interesting images and they respond to the surroundings and the light that's available. In a studio, you can't call yourself an available light specialist unless you're extremely specialized and already know your off-camera flash photography and studio lighting. I think that's where a lot of it separates, and you'd be surprised at the kind of minimalist gear that you're able to employ in any particular shoot to create a very professional commercial campaign. It doesn't have to be hectic, no.
Leon, based on the specific aspect of commercial photography that your client is requiring, so it could be a billboard or it could just be a digital sort of advert, how do you apply what gear to use for that specific job?
That's a great question, Isley. Firstly, obviously there are two parts of gear decisions. The first is the lighting. If it's a small product, then obviously you don't need major lighting. If it's something that you need to be portable with, that's part of the decision-making process. But solving the lighting is the one thing. That's the mood. And then the moment you pick up a camera, then you can figure out your lighting is settled, and then you can try your different cameras and lenses and all that. When you look at cameras and lenses, though, for commercial photography, sharpness is critical. And oftentimes it's not this romanticized, blurry, out of focus backgrounds that people want, unless it's a corporate portrait for something. Studio work often requires like macro photography, where a lot of focus needs to be very crisp and very sharp across the entire product. You can't just have the front of a milk carton or a ring in focus. You need to see more of that detail across the entire product. So when you make your decisions, you need to be able to trust the quality of the instrument that you're using. And with that, I've actually I met one of the Fuji reps down here in Cape Town. As I was transitioning, I was looking for something smaller and lighter. I have a back problem, so I needed to shave some weight out of my camera bag, and I had a go with the XT1 at that stage for a week or two, and just the image quality that I was able to produce and achieve straight out of camera without any editing, without any raw processing, just that was already so mind-blowingly amazing. The colors were accurate and all that. So that was something that I made it's a commercial choice, not just a convenient choice from a medical perspective. I realized I was being able to make high quality images with surprisingly small gear, very capable stuff. And then now recently the GFX was announced and launched, and I found that a lot of people think that that's just more megapixels in a more expensive body, so it looks very fancy. But actually, it's an even more technical beast of a camera. It's capable of producing absolutely amazingly, staggeringly sharp images. Like we did, we printed the JPEGs 2.5 meters high, with only cleaning up one or two dust spots on the images for those Bokeh Film Festival banners, and those looked absolutely staggering. For me, that's really important, that you're able to choose the right lens and the right camera for the type of product or shoot that you are doing for your client.
So when sitting down with clients, they often look at you for creative input, for inspiration for the shoot, and how do you tap into that creative pool?
That's a good question, Mike. Part of what makes you a unique photographer and able to stand out from a whole bunch of other people are the kind of things that you shoot, in the way that you the way that you light and compose and make something your own style. So for me, honestly, it's going back. I mentioned Irving Penn before. Another master I take a look at who fuses technical and creative elements of his artwork is Leonardo da Vinci. He was leagues ahead of his time, and yet he was able to produce incredibly good masterpieces, and he was a scientist at the same time. He is always asking questions. So drawing on the legacy of that and looking at more modern versions of it, where Monet, Van Gogh, and Cézanne, where they were challenged, it's like, okay, photography is coming down, and commercial photography especially, now still lifes and things are dealt with by a camera and not a painting. They had to go and reinvent, and they had to go back to why it is that painting is different from photography. Now, modern photographers have to ask the same thing: how is your own brand of photography different from everybody else's? Because otherwise, it becomes a bit of a redundant thing in a Me Too. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You just need to be honest enough with what it is that you create. So if you look at guys like Edward Batinsky, for instance, he shoots a lot of landscapes, but almost like post-apocalyptic kind of stuff. He shows landscape in the way that we humans interact with the planet and leave a negative kind of a footprint. That's his way of going about it. So the kind of guys that you look at for inspiration isn't necessarily even photographers. You take a look at art and design, the way that new car designs are coming on, or the way that you find inspiration in the way that the typeface is selected for a watch. Those kind of things are far more inspirational than other people's photographs, I think, and that's a really important thing. If you want to be inspired, don't look at other people's photographs. It's great to be in touch with what they're doing, but source from elsewhere, and that ensures something with the more original flavor.
As a final question, let's quickly just talk about post-production. It's one thing to know how to shoot, it's another to know how to do post-production. How much time do you spend in Photoshop after a shoot?
I try and spend as little as possible. The whole idea is shoot right, edit less, especially for commercial work, I think is key. Because by the time they commission you to do the work, the campaign already has momentum, and oftentimes a design team will have the campaign at a certain level of maturity already, and you come in halfway into that process, often and needing to make the images on the back of the conversations they've already had, and that means that they need the images sooner than later so that they can roll out their campaign. If it's that kind of a client as well, then I don't need to do all that much post-production. So if I shoot as close as they need it and they go and do further editing, then yes, they go and deep etch, and they go and comp and do that in their repro house or that division of their company. If it's a smaller company, though, often it comes down to the consultation beforehand. So I don't know what kind of time I need to spend on post-production. Sometimes it's actually quite simple, where the background just needs to be lit in a particular way so that the product is easy to separate from the background. If it's portraits, I need to know where that application goes, if it's going to be for a LinkedIn profile or if it's going to be for a global website where people are going to see them. It's two different applications, and the size does matter, because the moment you do portraits, obviously people want to look their best. So then you clean up a couple of marks here and there, and I think it's all down to shooting better and editing less. But for most part, for big commercial work, I give that to the client themselves, and they have a design team that takes care of the editing.
Sure.
Follow us on SOC_live, both on Instagram and on Facebook, where we will have links of Leon's work for you to check out. Gentlemen, it was nice chatting to you. Thank you so much, Leon, for discussing commercial photography with us a little bit more broadly. You guys must have a great day.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
brandlive.co.za